willing to tell us a little bit about Brooke, the young lady who we are here today to honor. So over to you, my friend.
Hey, Jason, it's Jeff. Can you do me a favor? Can you just unpin your video so that we can see Mark? I'm going to stop the share as well. I think it's important.
I don't know how to do that. Okay, go ahead, Mark.
All right. Oh, there we go. Wow, that's a lot better. Thank you, Jeff. Thank you, Jason, for putting this together and, you know, really bringing to light the story that actually brought me into the Alliance, which was, you know, Brooke getting sick. So, you know, I try to work through what I was going to say today and try not to turn into a sob fest. But, you know, as you all know, or many of you know, Brooke is my daughter, and she recently passed away from cancer. Back in May of last year, she was diagnosed, and the world turned upside down when that happened. And I reached out to Larry and I, because I needed the support that I was noticing as I was following you guys about 5 or 6 months prior to joining. And I felt like it was really lean into, not knowing what leaning into was. So I wrote up you know, some things about Brooke on the train ride home. Was looking at me and why I'm sitting there crying into my phone. Basically, not basically. For those of you kids, and you may know what I'm about to say. Everybody always hears, oh, do you have a favorite? I don't have favorite children. I have 3. But Brooke was the one I was connected to. Actually, the connection goes back to before she was even born, which is a really interesting dream now after everything that's transpired. Was I had a dream of a girl, that we had a girl, and ironically floated in through my bedroom window. And her name was Angela. And then everything that happened here, it just kind of adds new meaning to that. But she was blonde hair and blue eyes, just like Brooke. Trish, my wife, never liked Angela, so we named her Brooke Amanda. So, but anyway, Brooke was a caring soul. On at least one occasion, I mentioned to the guys on my mastermind that she liked to help other people. She didn't wear her heart on her sleeve, but you certainly felt it when she opened up to you. You know, she was like the little social worker in her class, and with her friends and with the family. She was like the glue that kind of kept us all together. And even throughout her illness, she was the same. She never gave up trying to keep us. There's plenty of times when we were at each other's throat and she would sit there and try to mediate going chemo and radiation and everything. So a very, what I thought was extremely inspiring. So that month in May last year when she got diagnosed, and after she went through lumbar puncture and a a spine biopsy where she was laid up for a good 36 hours and couldn't move. That weekend, she came out of the hospital. I ran down because she also had cancer. So Brooke was actually there for us as we were grieving for my dog. Meanwhile, she's coming out of the hospital. She wanted to meet her friends, and she was not a type of person that would stand up in front of a group of people. She was more or less would work more one-on-one. So when she told us that she wanted to meet her class, she was very specific on how she wanted to do it. We actually stayed inside the closet of her classroom and waited for an entire class to come in. And then she surprised them coming in her wheelchair and everything. And no one had seen her for probably a good 3 months. Sorry, not 3 months, like a couple weeks. And she broke down. But she still talked to everybody. She explained what was going on. It was very difficult for her, very difficult for us. But she worked very well outside of her comfort zone. Right after that, we went to the hairdresser because she wanted to have her hair cut off before she even took the first dose of chemo, because she didn't want her hair to fall out and clump. Now, mind you, I can't even get my son to cut his hair super short. My daughter had hair down to below her shoulder. She almost got a buzz cut out of it. And that was just, one or two instances of things that just continued during the entire 8 months. She was inspiring and just amazing. And she really gave me strength, even to this day. And I'm very grateful for a lot of things. I'm grateful for you guys. I'm grateful for all the support the Alliance gave. We had over 1,000 people at her funeral, and it was amazing. So I just wanted to let you guys know, thank you very much.
Thank you, Mark. And we're going to try our very best to do Brooke proud tonight. So guys, or everybody, I keep saying guys because I'm so used to talking to guys all the time. We have some women on the phone here. So so what we're going to do today, this is going to be like appreciative leadership. And so prepared it's going to be hands-on. We're not just going to be talking at you. You're going to be working with each other. So for anybody that didn't know that, there you go. But this is how this process works. Just absolute believers that what we're about to teach you is the future of leadership. And even beyond that, it's the future of how people will in order to make incredible things happen. And that when you look for strengths and you look for the best, you tend to find it. And so often we're told to do that. We're told to always to find what's making wrong better. But as we're going to show you as we walk through this masterclass, better way, it brings people to life. It creates new ways of organizing people's strengths or a team's strengths so you can get amazing things done. And probably the most important thing of all is all of the best of what's working so you can imagine a future and move towards that future, a future of your highest aspirations beyond what you even thought possible. That's what this type of leadership can do. That's why we are so passionate about it. We're so excited to share it with you today. So strap in, buckle up. It's going to be a wild, fun-filled, action-packed ride, and we're ready to rock. So I'm going to turn it over to you, Jeff Bowman.
Thank you, Jason. And I'm going to just preface this to say that I keep getting the notification that my internet is unstable. So if it is Jason or someone, just interrupt me and say, yeah, we didn't hear anything you just said. And hopefully it wasn't anything important. Just I guess before we get started and talk about what we're going to cover today, Jason, I'm going to turn it back to you. Maybe just do a quick introduction for those that might not know you, and I'll do the same.
Okay, so yeah, again, most people know me, but for those that don't, my name is Jason McKenzie. I am a dad of 2 teenage daughters who I love dearly, although tonight at dinner time was exceptionally irritating. I will say that right now. So, but they're great kids, and I love being a dad and I love being a husband. And I'm a certified facilitator in LEAF, which is an appreciative inquiry. And this is really what we're going to be talking to today. And so I use this all over the place. We both do. And it's amazing how applicable it is to a million different situations, whether it's creating communities or bringing teams together, designing core values. It's almost universally applicable in any situation where you bring groups of people together. So that's why I am so passionate about what we're doing here. It has fundamentally changed my life and just changed me as a human being.
All right, thanks, Jason. And you know, I could talk to the standard stuff that you guys see on the slide there, but I'm not going to. I guess what I would say, you know, I'm a father to 3 girls, 3 amazing girls, became certified in LEAF, which is leading through, like Jason said, experiential and appreciative facilitation several years ago. And I was actually part of the inaugural class. And, you know, funny enough, it was Jason who introduced me to the concept before I even enrolled for that. But I was at an event where the person was leading, John Berghoff was leading the event using this approach. And I was blown away. And I said, you know, when you create your certification for this, I'm going to be there. And I'll remember, you know, when I was at the capstone event for that initial training, and I was talking to someone about the different work that I had been doing with appreciative inquiry, with finances, with the university, and he asked me this really interesting question. He said, Jeff, you know, of all that work that you're doing, what's the thing that's making you most alive? And I paused for a minute, and you know, I thought back to many years before that in how I'd been in leadership roles and, you know, had tried a bunch of different approaches to engage teams in implementing goals and doing different things as it relates to culture, with some success, but many failures leading up to that success. And it wasn't until after that I got introduced to this different way of leading that I was like, wow, there is a different way of doing this in a way that naturally engages people. And so my response to him in that moment was, you know, of all the work that I'm doing, this is the area that makes me come alive. So, you know, I'm a CPA by trade, but I'm certified in facilitating, you know, appreciative inquiry, and I've done it in a variety of settings, from small, intimate, one-on-one, two-on-two type of settings, to mastermind, to team groups, to full system summits, to conferences, and everything in between. So I'm really excited for what we're going to share with you guys today. I think it really honors what Mark talked about in the strength that those books showed up. So with that, I guess this is our promise to you. Jason and I sat down and said, what are we going to commit to do through the course of this 3 hours? And 3 hours is a long time. But what we're going to do is we're going to share with you, I would say an approach, but it's the approach that we believe can dramatically change the way you see other people. And not only that, the way they see you. We're going to make it, like Jason said, interactive and experiential in nature. The best way that we know how to teach this is to actually have you experience it. So we're going to do a little bit of that on the call today. We're going to give you some real life examples of how to lead from a place of strength and appreciation. And I think those two things are important. And one thing I will say is, when I say lead from a place of strength, I'm not necessarily referring to you as the leader. I would say you're leading so that the group can come from a place of strength, and that as a leader, you can foster an appreciative environment. And then finally, our promise to you is that we will give you enough information so that you can start implementing this right away, whether it be with teams that you lead, teams you engage in, or in your personal life. Okay, so just some quick, housekeeping rules of engagement. because it is 3 hours and we want to get through as much as we can to give you guys as much value as possible. So we do ask that you mute your sound unless you are speaking. We have got the chat box on the side. You can definitely type chats into there, and we'll try to address them as we go, but we'll definitely get to them at the end. So please do mute your sound unless you have something important to say. Please be present. So, you know, the one thing I said is it's 3 hours. If you need to take a break, we get it. You know, I would put money on it that Jason will be the first person to take a bathroom break. But if you need to take a break, please do so. And then when you're here, we ask that you be engaged. Take notes if you wish, but remember that we will make this recording available to you afterwards. And I've already confirmed that, yes, in fact, we are recording. So you can take notes, things that stick out to you, but you'll be able to come back and watch this again. Like I said before, if you have questions or if you just hear something that gives you energy, comment in the chat box. You know, we'll look for those. We'll want to draw on those. We'll look for questions, and we'll try to get to them as soon as we can. If not now, at the end of the call or even afterwards. And then last but not least, have fun. That's an important note for me as well, to smile on the call. I've had that feedback before where you're so serious, you're trying to get through information, but this is a wonderful approach that makes it come alive, and I want to be able to present it to you, and hopefully you guys feel the same way. Finally, you know, to add to what Jason said, thank you everyone for joining. Thank you to those that we know couldn't be on the call that are going to be watching this as a recording, for supporting such a wonderful cause. Mark's become a very close friend to many of us, and this is really our way of allowing Brooke's strength and legacy to live on. You know, Mark mentioned that she was a person that really wanted to help others, and you know, what better way to honor that than giving you some tools that can help you and can help other people. And that's why we say this is really, in our minds, a win-win-win. It's a win for, you know, Brooke's legacy. It's a win for you as an individual and a leader. And I believe that if you take this and you implement it, it's a win for everybody around you. Teams you lead, groups you bring together, your families, different people in any setting of your life. So with that, we're going to get started. Jason, I'm going to turn to you.
Yeah, so convene a group of people of the first, and we'll talk more about this in an interactive exercise here. So, but whenever we convene a group of people together, the first thing we want to sense of shared purpose. Okay, so by understanding and asking questions around why is it important for you to be here today, for you to be able to be participating, for you to be developed, important to you. And what happens is, what you're going to see as we go through this exercise is some wonderful information, some wonderful themes are going to emerge. Some of the things that connect us as a in being here today. So again, our first exercise will be connecting to purpose, and we're going to do that by asking you a question related to purpose. And so let me just walk you through to happen. So we're going to flip to the next slide in a second, and then we're going to ask you this question. Okay, what is that? Oh, there, Jeff.
Hey,
what
Jason,
is this?
That's what is strength-based appreciative leadership. This is a funny story. So as I was getting ready for the call, I didn't even notice. Our cat jumped up on the keyboard, and she basically wanted to put her prints on this workshop. So just keep going.
Okay. So what SWA, strength-based appreciative leadership, is it's really a revolutionary approach to leading teams of all sizes through change with appreciative inquiry. We're going to talk tons about appreciative inquiry. So, and it's also collaborative in nature. Okay. Very experiential, very collaborative, very connecting. And the point of it, the fundamental foundational piece of it, is that you build upon the best from the past, present, and the future. Okay. So that's what you're going to see as we walk through this. So here's what we're going to do. The first thing we want you to do is we want you to reflect on this question. The question is, what is attracting you to a more inclusive approach to leadership? And why is this workshop important to you personally, your team or organization, and your community or the world. And the reason that's so important, those sort of three dimensions or three perspectives on why it's important, is because we want you to dream big. We fully believe leadership is a force for positive change in the world. It goes way beyond leading a team, even leading a company, and it sends ripples of goodness, a positivity and a positive change out into the world. So when we ask you these questions, we always want you to dream big and think about how taking a different approach to leadership will actually change the world. So again, the question we're asking is, what is a positive and strength-based approach to leadership to you personally, your team or organization, or your community or the world? So what we'd like you to do now is take maybe, are we going to give maybe 3 minutes to reflect on this question and journal your answer. So just don't spend time analyzing it or overanalyzing it. Just write down whatever thoughts, ideas, images. It can be sentence, it can be bullet point form. It doesn't really matter. But write down, reflect on this question and write down your answer, and do it with an open heart. Okay? Don't hold yourself back. And that's it. So again, take 3 minutes, reflect on those questions, and then what we're going to do is we're going to come back and we're going to share some of our answers. So let's get going. 3 minutes.
If you don't know by now, ain't no use to sit and wonder why, baby. Never, never, I'm out. Your rooster crows at break of dawn. I'll be gone. Your reason I'm traveling on. Don't ain't no use like I never know. Ain't no use in turning on the light. I'm on the dark side of the road. There was something to try and make me change my mind and stay. We never did too much. Don't think twice, it's alright. Ain't no use in calling out my name, girl, like you never done before. Ain't no use in calling out my name, girl, I can't hear you anymore. Thinking and wondering, walking down the road where I once loved a woman. Child, I'm told I gave her my heart, she wanted my soul. Don't think twice, it's all. So long, honey,
All right, guys, or everybody. I keep saying guys, sorry, everybody. Now what we're going to do is we're going to ask maybe two to share their answers to that question. And the reason that we do this is because it's in the sharing of these questions that, not only does incredible information emerge, but again, some common themes through this process, and that connects us together. And what happens is we will develop a sense of shared purpose that binds this group, this human system that we have right our time together and beyond. So who's would be open to sharing their answer to that question? So Drew up in the corner. Yep.
Good to go.
Yep.
Okay. Inclusivity and positivity and that strength-based approach, I think, are essential for creating safety and connection. And from what I've seen in education and coach in general, is that when you have safety and connection, it's a fertile ground for learning, growth, cooperation, collaboration, really good things. I think it's the right tone for leadership. I think it's uplifting and empowering. The human potential seems to be so much more when you tap into this tone of leadership. And I get excited about that, personally in my own life, leading my family, leading my own group of dads, community online. And like you said, the applications are limitless.
You're muted, Jason.
So I said, I saw my good buddy. Yeah, Dave.
Hey, sorry, for some reason my headphones kind of ended there. Hey, Jay, it's been a long time. Been a while.
Yeah.
So for most of it, my name is Dave. I know I'm one of these kind of mastermind. But Jay and I have talked quite a bit about what he's been doing here. So on a personal level, I'm really just kind of interested in seeing how this adds to the tool belt on a daily basis, on whether it's again home life or work life. So personally, as by trade, I'm a software developer that moved into more of a management role. So as creating things and your own, you get that kind of dopamine hit by creating something that actually works. But you don't get that in management roles. You're gonna have to get those little dopamine hits by getting other people to kind of maximize and excel, kind of beyond what their potential and what they really feel they can do. And I on Toronto, more of a multicultural, so many different personalities, so many different cultures, but they all kind of boil down to this. You wipe away all that kind of goo, and we all kind of boil down to the same thing. So it's really trying to cut through all that cultural noise to see how you can kind of maximize people's potential. For me, I'm just really here to see what Jay does on his spare time, and kind of see, is this another tool I can add to my tool belt for things like that.
All right. Two more people. Javier?
So yeah, and so I'm in the corporate world as well, and I feel like in my business, especially we're very reactive as opposed to being proactive, and so people tend to be cut down a lot, always told what they're doing wrong, and working around that. So what I've discovered since I've been working with you guys and in my role as a manager, where the people I lead feel important, like they contribute in positive ways, and where they have support in the space to grow into the best they can be. I also want to be in this company. I'd like to be the leader to. I want to be innovative in this company. I kind of want to take that. Nobody's doing that in our company. They're just happy with doing things the old way, and I kind of want to introduce these new things to them and take charge of that and bring innovation into the company so that we can be more productive, morale, do things like that. So that's the way I'm looking at it.
Awesome. Hey, anybody else want to share? I was going to ask you, Ed. Eddie V. So for yourself, for your team, and for the world.
Sure. So first off, the reason is that I've always believed in a strengths-based approach to self-improvement, to leadership, and never really had a framework in which to potential that I see here in this framework, in this system, I think provides a lot of opportunity for me. The reason it's important to me is that I definitely want to level up my leadership game. And in terms of my organization, I have a new role that I started in January, and we have multiple stakeholders in my company, in a partner of ours, and then in the customers and I think that we can bring AI and this leadership approach to the table to allow us to go beyond our current that we have. And then, looking at it from a worldly perspective, I think we need a kinder, more positive approach to interacting with each other, something to foster trust. And I just see the current environment, and it's kind of a global problem. It's not just a very sort of localized thing. So like this, I think, could really help in that area as well.
Absolutely. Hey, Scott, did you want to be our last share? Scott Brown?
Sure, I can. I was more or less giving Ed a thumbs up for
I
that
know.
last statement. I really love that. But I guess the key theme for all those three areas for me is empowerment. And when I see the empowerment, when you, whether it be in your community, in your relationships, or in your work, that is incredible. And I think we need a lot more empowerment and empowering people, because everybody's got an amazing gift. We just need.
Absolutely. All right. Thank you. So, Jeff, were you capturing themes, images there? Or
Of course I was.
Yes, you were.
Yes.
All right. I will turn it over to Jeff to summarize what we heard.
Yeah, the amazing thing as you listen to each other share, we could have gone through everybody on this call, and what I would imagine would happen is that you'd see the same themes come up over and over and over again, right? Uplifting and empowering, higher morale, more productive people, a kinder approach. It was all around people and what you could do with people if you have a kinder, more different approach. And so that's what I heard from you guys, and that's what we see too, right? What we see is that when we bring people together and we include them, I heard inclusive from you guys. When we include them, we tap into their potential. I heard those words from, I think it was David. When we tap into their potential, the possibilities are endless. And I can tell you from doing this, that truly does happen when you use an approach like this. And some of you have been at events where we've seen that happen, and it's just truly amazing. All right, do you want me to keep going here, Jason? Let me share my screen with you guys again, if I can get the PowerPoint slide back up. And now I lost the share. Just give me a second here. Technical difficulties. Okay, you guys can see that again. Let's see if I can launch it. All right. So before we got into the detailed, methodology behind this and let you guys understand the process that we use to bring a strength-based appreciative approach to groups of any size, we thought it's probably important to share with you, kind of how and where we use this approach. And so there's several ways we do this, right? And really, it's more about what we're creating than where we're using it. So we can use this in groups to create psychological safety instantly. And I think Drew, you mentioned safety, right, as you shared your answer. So we use this in any group to create instant psychological safety through asking powerful questions, just like the one you guys just heard. We use this to design and facilitate group conversations that create energy and innovation. So if we have, a desire to bring a group together and make them come alive so that they can innovate on new products, solutions, ideas, approaches within the workplace with customers, those types of things. We use this to lead others to a faster creation of values and visions. And this is really powerful. And Jason does a ton of work around this area and goes into organizations London Life, he was at one this past weekend, where you can instantly, using the powerful questions behind appreciative inquiry, create values and visions that everybody connects with, that everybody's actually involved in creating. And it's unbelievable to see how fast they're created, but how fast they come to life as a result. We use this to co-create, based on bringing a group of people together, solutions to complex problems. So some of the biggest problems that teams or organizations are facing, we can use this approach to bring people together, not only to solve that problem, but to create whole new possibilities for what could be. And so there's an interesting thing that happens, and I'll talk about that in just a minute. We use this to bring like-minded individuals together to advance their goals, right? So it could be in a mastermind setting, it could be in a convention setting, it could be an entire community of online people coming together virtually or in person to advance on something that they're focused on creating. Here's some of the the different places that we've used it, and you can see PV, which is for those that are in Canada and Ontario, that's TSC stores, and PV merged, and we'll talk about that later. The Socialite conference, Ed, who's on the call, attended that conference with me. Western University, London Life. This approach has been used within our Leaf community with companies like Facebook, the United Nations. It's been used with entire communities or cities like the city of Cleveland, and I can share with you guys that we're working on one right now with the city of Toronto. So bringing a whole group of people together to convene around solving some of the city's most complex problems in the biggest city here in Canada. It's been used at a bunch of different companies all over the world, and you see Cleveland Clinic there. I want to talk about that one now, right? So this is being used, and the approach is becoming much more widely accepted and needed because of that kind of approach, like Ed talked about earlier. So what I want to do is give you, we keep talking about appreciative inquiry in the words here. I want to give you guys a little bit of the history behind appreciative inquiry, because I think it's important to do that to set the tone so that you understand this is a different approach, but it's not necessarily a new approach. And so the person you see up on screen here is David Cooperrider. And the quote we mentioned is that we move in the direction of our conversations, right? And so David Cooperrider, it was over 30 years ago. He was working at Case Western University. I think he was actually doing his doctorate at that time. But he was working there, and he got called in by the Cleveland Clinic. And the Cleveland Clinic called him in because they were dealing with some really complex challenges in their hospital. And when David arrived, he arrived to a room of consultants and leaders that had been focusing on trying to find these solutions to these problems for some time. And what David noticed instantly in that meeting was that everybody was focused on what was wrong. They were focused on what was missing. They were focused on, all the things that weren't going right. And he thought to himself in that moment, as he was going through the research series, he says, what if there was a different approach? What if instead of focusing on what's wrong, what's broken, and what's missing, what if we focused on, what's working? What if we focused on when we've been at our best? What if we focused on what's possible? What might happen in this room? And so he actually posed that to the group, and by asking a series of powerful questions, they came up with amazing results. And that was really the birth of this philosophy, this leadership approach called appreciative inquiry. Okay, so what is appreciative inquiry? In its simplest form, it's the search through questions, I would say, and that's the inquiry part of it, for the best of what was, the best of what is today, and the best of what could be in the future. And so it's appreciative in nature. It's forward-looking. It's moving you in a direction that you want, right? Instead of moving in a direction you don't, which is centered around problems, right? So if we think about problem solving, what's missing, what's broken, that's all the things that you don't want. So why not, use an approach that searches for the things that we do want? And really, what's happening in society, and you guys picked up on it by answering that purpose question, right? Is that leadership is changing. The future of leadership is changing, for many different reasons. One is you've got a different, demographic coming into the workforce, and you've got, baby boomers, Gen X, millennials, all working together. You've got technology coming to play where answers are at our fingertips. And so John Kelly at IBM actually said it really well. He said, the future of leadership is the ability to ask the right questions, right? That's the true mark of genius, because the answers are right at our fingertips. You know, you can Google anything these days, and you see it in many conversations, right? Someone will just say, well, let me look it up. So really the future of leadership and the mark of genius as we move forward is the ability to ask the right questions that move people from where they are to where it is they want to go. And so if I summarize that, right, really what we're looking at here is an old paradigm in leadership focused on, like I said before, a problem-solving or deficit-based approach, right? You look at any organization and you probably see this, you know, daily or weekly in the groups that you work with, the organizations. You can see it everywhere, right? Is that people want to, and they tend to go to where the problems are. And they look at things from a deficit-based approach. They feel a need. They take that need and they say, okay, what could be causing the issues that we're having right now in the organization? There's, you know, analysis of causes. Then you go into analysis of possible solutions. So if we think we know what the causes of these problems are, then we just have to do this, this, and this because we think it's going to solve those problems, and we create actions around that. The problem with this approach, if I use those words, is that it's actually, you know, energy draining. So what happens in a room, if you're in any team meeting, if you're in any online conversation, no matter where you are in your family setting, when you focus on problems and trying to solve that problem, you drain the energy right out of the room. And so David's approach that he created in the strength-based appreciative leadership approach, which has evolved from appreciative inquiry, is really, you know, focusing on strength. So it's appreciating and valuing, like we talked about, the best of what was. It's envisioning what could be in the future, then designing how might we do that, and deploying what, you know, what will be, right? So it's a whole different way of looking at it. What ends up happening is you move from, you know, restoring to status quo to moving from problem to whole new possibilities. And so I'd actually say, you know, the old paradigm is a deficit-based approach. You could say the new paradigm is strength-based, or you could say that it's a possibility-based approach, because new things emerge. And I'm going to call in Jason here for a second to share a story after I do. The British Airways example is a really good one, and this goes back some time with appreciative inquiry. And they called in a group of consultants that were trained in appreciative inquiry, and they said, the problem that we're having, we want to bring a group of people together to talk about our lost baggage problem. And so when the consultants went in, they encouraged British Airways to you know, think about a different task for bringing a whole bunch of people together. And they said, so what we want you to do is think about something different than just solving your lost baggage problem. Think bigger in terms of what might be possible. And so they went back to the table, they thought about it, and they came back to these consultants and they said, what we really need to focus on is how do we create a better customer arrival experience? And so through that process, then what ended up happening was they naturally solved the lost baggage problem, but they also created whole new possibilities around all the other areas related to the customer arrival experience. And so Jason, I want to turn over to you because I know you got a really powerful story to share.
Yeah, so we're going through something right now at London Life. So I'm sure everybody involved in an employee engagement survey of some kind. And typically as leaders, what happens is, everybody does the employee engagement survey. You wait a little while, you get the results, and then you do something like this. Okay, let's spend 3 seconds things that we did well. Oh, yay, we did this really well. And now let's focus on the things that we did poorly on and figure out how to do better on those things that we kind of suck at right now, basically. So what we're going to do is we're going to get focus groups to create action plans with the idea of focusing on what we're not doing well and trying to bring what we're not doing well, like make it better. The issue with that is that it's a drag to focus on what you're doing wrong all the time, and it's not the most effective way to innovate yourself into the future. So what we're doing instead was we have a values statement. So the employee engagement, we have a value statement the value statement is probably like it is in many companies, where it's a bunch of words printed on a PowerPoint or a poster somewhere that never gets talked about, is not used to as the sort of it doesn't form the fabric of the culture. It's not used to direct decisions, anything. So we thought, okay, what if we do this instead? Instead of doing the traditional deficit-based model that I just described, everybody together, we'll get them together in small groups and we'll ask different questions. We'll focus on how might we bring the values that we hold dear, that we say we hold dear, how might we bring them to life? So we're going to bring people together and we're going to ask them a couple of questions. Very simple. We're going to ask them a question about, hey, 12 months where you have seen these values, one or more of these values being fully lived. Like, tell us about that. Talk about that moment. What made it so exceptional? What was the outcome? How did you contribute to it? How did it feel? Like all these kinds of questions. And then the next question is, future, what the culture and how we might be, we lived these values and made them the fabric of everything we do. And so then we're going to get people to design that or to imagine that. And through that process, what we're going to do is we're going to get incredible information about what's working the best and what people's dreams for the future together for the next phase, which is designing solutions, right? But so the issue, the important point to take away is, so not only will the goals to improve employee engagement, this is going to incredibly increase employees and creating the future they want to create based on sitting with them to explore the very best when they've been at their very best, when we've been living these values. So not only will we just increase employee engagement, we will innovate in a very powerful way the way we work. Really, that's the difference between deficit-based thinking and strength-based, appreciative-based thinking.
Very good. So really what Jason did is he just gave you a roadmap for, the types of questions that we ask. And so appreciative inquiry, the philosophy, the approach, there's many different ways to present this, but I like to present it centered around what I said earlier, which is the questions, right? The questions that we use, the inquiry part of appreciative inquiry, to create a collaborative, experiential, engaged environment. And so what happens here, and can you guys see the mouse that's on the screen? Jason, can you see that? Okay, I'm going to assume the answer is yes. Yeah, okay, Simon says yes, perfect. All right, so when I talk to this, I'm going to follow through the order that we would normally follow, right? And so with appreciative inquiry, there is a methodology, a foundational approach, as you might call it, to how we will create conversations in any setting. And what we will always do, or most often do, is go in this order. And so we may skip one of these areas, but we're still going to go in the order that's outlined here. And so appreciative inquiry is really around asking questions first and foremost that connect us to purpose, that connect us to a why. And so, you think about any group that's been brought together, what usually happens is that someone sits up in front of the room and tells you why it's important to be in that specific meeting. Or, if you think of this call, we could have sat on this call and told you 20 reasons why we thought it was important that you were here. But instead of doing that, what we did is we asked you a question. We asked you a question that connected you to the purpose for you being here, the purpose for you learning about the topic that we're going to learn about. And when we do that and we ask it from a three-dimensional perspective, which is asking a question about why is this important to you? Why is this important to your team? Why is this important to the world? What we do very quickly is we get a group of people together that maybe don't know each other, that don't know each other well, or they work across different normal boundaries within an organization, and we can quickly get them to connect to a shared purpose. And when you connect to a shared purpose, everything else becomes engaging, enlightening, and it just moves naturally and faster than ever before. So we always try to ask, and this is a really good tool, as you think about a meeting you're in or a conversation maybe with a group of people that isn't going in a positive direction, you might think to ask a purpose-driven question. Why is this topic that we're talking about here right now important? Why is it important to you? What's meaningful about it? Ask that question that connects people back into a why. At some point here, I'm going to ask Jason to share a bricklayer story too, because I think it's important as we think about conversations. The next type of question that we like to ask is a question that connects us to our strengths. And so this could be connecting someone to their individual strengths. It could be connecting people to, a group strengths, an organization strengths, whatever it might be. But we connect people to strengths often through questions around the best of what was or the best of what is today. And so, if I were to lay out 6 fundamental questions that you'd ask, the first question on that list would always be asking a question that connects people to purpose. The second question would be asking people that connects them to a high point moment of success from the past. And so maybe sometimes we would skip that if we don't have the time, and we'd say, instead of a high point moment of success from the past, maybe we'll ask them, what's working really well in your life right now? Or if you think about a team that's convened together, what's working well in this team? What are we doing well that no matter what we change as we go through this exercise, we want to nurture and protect, right? So the best of what is or the best of what was in the past are 2 types of strengths questions that we would ask. The third type of question that we almost always ask, right? So these 3 here we almost always ask. The third question would be a question that connects us to images of the future. And this is really about what might be. And I'm going to talk about this in a few minutes as it relates to the principles behind appreciative inquiry, which comes from the science in this. But really, if you think about it, is if you can connect to these positive images in your mind about what might be in this area that you've convened to talk about, you start focusing on those images and you start moving towards them. So we always want to ask questions that connect people to some kind of image, to something they can see, something visual that's out there in the future. From there, so after we've done that, we've connected to people where they want to go, then we can start moving into questions that attach them to outcomes, right? How might we do this? What are the things that you could do to get yourself closer to that future image? And then we might take a group through questions that connect to aligned action. So what will be? Now that we know what ideas we have that we can implement, how are we going to do that as a group? What are we going to commit to? What are we going to do leaving here? And so what happens when we ask questions in this type of foundational circle is that people in groups will naturally come to better outcomes faster than they would have through any other approach that we've seen. We've seen it over and over and over again. So a little later in this masterclass, we're going to explain the science behind this, but I think it's really important that you understand there's a set type of questions that you can ask in any situation. And I would say to you that if you ask one of these questions, it can be extremely powerful and life-giving to that group you're in. Any one of those first 3, a purpose-driven, a strengths question, a question around images of the future, you ask any one of those questions and you'll watch a room, just transform right in front of your eyes. Okay.
Yeah, so let me tell you guys the bricklayer story, because I think it really is a power. So some of you may have heard it, but it's a really powerful story or parable that illustrates how purpose is socially constructed. And we can, again, as Jeff's been saying, connect to a shared purpose and really create a very powerful foundation that binds the group together. So there's this, this dude walking down the street. He walks along these people, and they look like they're laying bricks, bricklayers. He sends to the first bricklayer, "Hey, what are you doing?" And he goes, "Oh, I'm just laying some bricks here in order to feed my family." And the guy goes, "Hey." Next guy, he says, "Hey, what are you doing?" And the guy goes, "I am building a wall that will stand the test of time, that will outlast me, and this will be my legacy." Cool. Guy, and he says, "What are you doing?" And he goes, "I am building a cathedral that will connect people to their creator." So what you see there is you see 3 people doing the exact same task, perspectives. And so the idea with that is that if we can get a group of people together, we can create a shared purpose. It's socially constructed. we can help really a group of people define at a really powerful and fundamental ways to sort of move them closer to the cathedral example of why it's important for us to be here. So even if you look at maximizing human potential, we heard safety, we heard trust, we learned important for us to be here through the collective wisdom of this group of people that none of us really knew individually. We got much more information and a much deeper sense of purpose.
Beautiful. And I'm going to come back to that in a little bit. I like how you linked into the principles there, Jason. So what we thought we'd do now is we would do another exercise, another experiential exercise with you guys. And that exercise is around appreciative interviews. And so if I go back to the previous slide, what we talked about is the types of questions that we would ask in any setting, right? And these questions, I can tell you, the more people you have in the room, the longer it takes to go through these questions based on how we choreograph the conversations. So when you have a group of 5 or 10 people, you can move through them faster than you could with a group of 150 people, for example. So what we would normally do, and I bring this up for a purpose, when we do appreciative interviews, is we would normally ask 2 to 3 of these questions in an appreciative interview. And so when I explain appreciative interviews and you go through the example, just keep in mind that we would normally ask 2 to 3 of these questions, usually a purpose and a strengths question, or a strengths and a future images question, or a purpose, strengths, and future images question. What we want to give you right now through this process is just a taste of what an appreciative interview is, so that it's something you can take away and bring to any group setting, any team you lead, any organization, any mastermind group that you want to run, things like that. So appreciative interviews can be very, very powerful. And when you do them in a way where you ask 2 people to come together, and if you think of people in a room, not necessarily virtually, when people are knee to knee and they're talking about and celebrating moments of strength, or what is a deep purpose to, about what they want to create as it relates to this task, or they're thinking about and talking about the images that inspire them in the future, and they're talking knee to knee, think about how powerful that is. You can bring, a CEO into a room that's talking to, I'm an accountant, so I use that example, an accounts payable processor, and you can put them knee to knee and ask questions like this and watch them just blossom. We were doing the Socialite conference in Toronto, and we brought 2 people together, not 2 people specifically, but the 2 people that came together were from different cities. And so there's a lady there from Toronto, and there's an individual there from New York, and they got together, and I swear by the time they shared, it looked like they were going to leave the room and get married. That's how well they connected through this type of process. So what is an appreciative interview? It's really when you get, you use appreciative questions to bring people together and connect on an individual level, right? One-on-one, eye to eye, and you create a space that allows people to share their stories. So, in a traditional interview, when you think of that word, you're probably thinking, well, we're going to interview each other, so I'm going to ask this person and drill them in a bunch of questions. But I want you to think about it in a bigger perspective. It's not a conversation, right? This is an interview, just as if you're doing a job. So you're going to ask someone questions and listen for their responses. You're going to ask probing questions to dig deeper. You're going to approach those questions and listen with curiosity, right? You're really going to try to soak in and pull from them as much positivity and energy as you can get. So what we're going to do on this call, and I mentioned in a live setting what it does, we've actually done this many, many times in virtual settings as well, and it's just as powerful. You're not knee to knee, but when we bring people together virtually, putting them into breakout rooms, and having them connect like this, they get to know each other way faster than you would just in a group setting. So we're going to go through that with you guys right now. We're going to pair you up and ask you to interview each other. And when we say interview each other, we're going to give you the question that we're going to ask you to read to the other person and ask them to share back to you. As you're listening, what we would encourage you to do is really listen for the things that first you love, right? So when they're sharing, just what do you really love about that? I like how Scott Brown, who's been in one of our masterminds, mentioned, and recognize with Ed share what he loved about that. And that really shows someone that you're engaged and you're listening, right? So look for those things that you really appreciate them sharing to you. Look for the things as the person sharing that are giving them energy. So as someone shares something, shares a story from the past, and as they share the lessons from that story, the different details about that story, when is it that they're coming to life in that share? Because those are the things you're going to want to probe about. I really noticed this, so tell me more about that, right? You're going to look for that positive energy and ask those probing questions. Share back to them what you loved, and be prepared to share with the bigger group. So as you come back, what we're going to ask you to do is be prepared to share what you learned from the breakout partner that you have, not the breakout partner. Okay, anything to add to that, Jason, before I go to the question? But
No, you're all good.
okay, it's going to say silence is acceptance, right? Okay, so here's the question that we want you guys to ask each other. And so what we would normally do in an appreciative inquiry setting with a group is we would say, we would read the question a couple times to them, and then we would let them go. We'd have them start to interview each other. What I'm going to do, what Jason and I talked about doing in this setting, is a little bit different. So you see here, we only have one question. We didn't ask 3 questions. We asked 1 question, and we really went to strengths, right? A strength-based question, a story from your past, right? So we're going to talk about moments of excellence, and I'm going to read the question to you here and give you a couple minutes to journal. And what we would normally do in an appreciative inquiry setting is not give you that time to journal. We would just read the question really slowly, so you have time to think about it and put some points down on paper, but then give the opportunity for the other person to interview. So we're going to give you maybe just a minute, right? After I read this question a couple times, for you to write down some key points before you go into the breakout rooms. We're going to randomly pick who you're partnering up with, and we're going to give you space to interview each other. So one person will go in entirety, that person will listen, reflect back, ask probing questions, tell them what they loved, look for curiosity and energy in the share, and be prepared to share that person's story back with the rest of the group. And then we'll do some group shares as we come back together with all of us. So Jason's posted it in the chat box, because when you break out into your separate groups, you're not going to be able to see this screen anymore. And so you've got the question up there. I'm going to read through it now with you guys. What we want you to do is tap into a question around strengths, right? We already did the purpose question earlier, so let's tap into a story from the past about the best of what was. So we want you to think, reflect, put some points down on paper about your experiences as a leader. And if you're someone who doesn't have a ton of experience as a leader, it could be your experiences as part of a team, okay? So as you're thinking about your experiences as a leader, we want you to reflect on one high point story, right? A time that stands out from all the others where you're with a group or you're leading a group. It stands out in a positive and meaningful way, right? It'd be a time where, as you looked around the room, the team that was gathered there, the group that was gathered, felt really alive. They felt involved, they felt appreciated, and they were excited about what it is they were doing with you. They were excited about their involvement on that team and in the organization. Okay, so what we want you to do is detail that story of what happened, and we want you to reflect on why it was such a high point experience. What made it that way? What were you contributing to that moment? What were other people contributing to that moment? What was happening? How did it feel? Okay, so take a moment, reflect on a high point story, one time that stands out from all of the others in a positive, meaningful way, a time where everyone was alive, connected, involved, appreciated, and happy about being part of that team or organization, as detailed as possible, and what was contributing to that moment. All right, so I'm gonna stop the share. I can do this here. I'm gonna create some breakout rooms. So let's try this. So some of you will have likely, I'm just gonna move to breakout 1. Let's move to breakout 2. What happens is it always puts Jason in a group, and well, we just don't want Jason in the group. So
There's no value there whatsoever.
okay, let's see what we got here. I'm going to move a couple more people that already know each other well. And there's some science behind this, right? I want you guys connecting to people that maybe you haven't talked to before. 6. And so just bear with me here. I think that's pretty good. All right, so we're gonna break you apart. We're gonna give, how much time do we say, Jason? 15 minutes?
15 minutes, so 7.5 minutes apiece.
So 7.5 minutes apiece. We'll give you a minute right now before I create those breakout rooms to just jot those points down. You're gonna reflect on a high point story as a leader, part of the group. You know, what stands out, what was meaningful about it. Oh, we just lost someone. Okay. That's okay. So, Mark, you're going to stay with us, if that's all right. But you're not going to get off the hook. Yeah, high point moment when you felt alive, most involved, most appreciated in the involvement in that organization. So 1 minute, then we'll break out 15 minutes, take about 7 to 8 minutes per side, and then we will just automatically bring you back into the big group. If you're done early, we will just come on back. All right? Give you a minute now, and then we'll start it off.
Oh, my little heart, on this perfect day, with everyone loves you gathered from the we'll always be. Oh, my little heart, oh, my perfect.
I'm gonna move, Mark. I'm actually gonna move you to a group. So you're gonna be a group with
Only
3.
you arrived and turned me into well. Proudest pop standing out with you in your darkest days, through your joy and tears. Oh, taught her, and know I'm always here, and I love you more and always. As Florida child.
All right, I'm going to create the breakout rooms as you go in, guys. You're going to be invited to join, and you'll have to actually click to join that breakout room. Darren, every time.
You got 2 sessions going here.
All right. Which one didn't you join? It's Sarah. Darren, I'm going to move you here. 6.
Can you, the one where there's no picture, or do I have to do that? I don't know. I've got 2 sessions.
You should got to click to join now, Darren.
Yeah.
All right. We got one of Darren. That's good.
All right, good to you.
You see my screen again, Jason?
I just see something. Well, I see a blank slide. Oh, there we go. Okay. Yeah, we're good.
All right, we got everybody back. It looks like it.
All right.
All right. We didn't know if we should bring you guys back because nobody had come back early and we were getting a little bit worried. It must have been really, really, really powerful. And we had Andy Storch join while you guys were out, and we were like, Andy, you're the only guy that showed up. All right, let's get to it. So what we want to do now is a few group shares. So what we want you guys to bring to the bigger group is any powerful story that either you shared or that was shared to you. So in your one-on-one sessions if you heard something really powerful you think the rest of the group should hear, or if you just want to share your story because you think it's lighting you up and that people should hear it. So with that, I'm going to stop my share here, which I just started, and we're going to look for some volunteers. Do you guys want me to bring the question back up? Oh, we got it in the chat box. All right, who wants to go first? Darren, thank you.
Can you hear me?
I can.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I was fortunate to get on a session with Sarah. Yeah, she lit me up with her story that she leads a team of 40 people, and when asked how to introduce a new training into her organization, she was able to just empower the people in the team to ask, what do we think we need? And she asked so many powerful questions. And as a leader, she sat back and was just asking the questions in terms of what do we want this to look like? What can you contribute? And the whole and she was able to collaborate forward. And it was all generative questions she was using. What do you want? What do you enjoy? And what a part of this, taking it forward. And it was just a lot of what you and Jeff have already said was encapsulated in that leadership and that training module that she put together, and that collaboration. That was really a really positive experience that she shared with me.
All right. Thank you, Darren. Who else has a story they want to share, either their own or someone else's? Mr. Brown, and then Simon up next.
So Drew and I had a great conversation, and one of the key themes that came out with Drew was risk taking. He's a risk taker, and I think powers, and I think that's a phenomenal trait for a leader. And I just, I told Drew that that came out so many times. Conversation, that's obviously something that's very, very meaningful for him. And so I think the key takeaway for Drew is going to be calling him Daring Drew, because he takes lots of risks, and I want him to keep doing that to be a great leader. In fact, he already is a great leader. Just take more risks.
Love it. And Drew's in our mastermind group, and I would say he's a risk taker just by wearing the headphones that he does every week. All right, who would we like to hear from next? So Simon.
Hey, guys. So had a really good had an experience that he had going out on a fishing boat and doing taking a industry, because apparently that exists, out onto the water and captaining their own the other guy's boat. And for two guys that knew nothing about fishing, I think we picked up on the not only the passion, but now I almost reckon I could captain a boat because of John's explanation. Don't cut the corners because that's where you pick up the fish. But just the enthusiasm that he came with, and what really struck me was the ability to balance kind of natural inclination, catch as many fish as possible, kind of needs of the people on his boat, particularly to make sure that they had a good kind of angling experience. So balancing that need for those sometimes conflicting needs, a good demonstration of recognizing priorities within the group and making sure you find a balance between all of them.
Love it. All right, I think Ed, you had your hand up.
Sure, I can speak 1 sec. Travis and I had a great conversation about his first job out of college, actually. So he graduated with a degree in woodworking and on this local company that was doing some really innovative design. And actually just hearing him talk about how, you know, typically in the furniture industry, you either buy your furniture packed flat or you buy it ready-made, but this was a high-end furniture company. And they had a key to basically take this really high-end furniture and pack it like a Japanese puzzle box, and it was all held together by one little pin. And so Drew joined the production team, and Travis, not Drew. Travis joined the production team, and within a short period of time, it really his education up quickly, trained fast, and became somewhat of a go-to, and became the right-hand person of this production manager. And he said he was just the innovation. I mean, as he was talking about the innovation, the environment that he worked in, where his manager was kind of a low-key, hands-off manager that, you know, let you bring ideas forth. So he said a lot of research into, you know, how to make everything they were doing even that much better, and just got jazzed up by that. So he brought a ton of energy to it. And as he was speaking about it, I could hear him talk about that. And he said that, you know, he was so excited because there was a lot of wind at his back all the time. There was always something really cool happening to propel him forward. So what's really interesting is that that's a story from when he first graduated. Used what he learned from that experience to actually sign up with another company that is doing, you know, innovative work as well. And that experience helped him to make a decision to say, yeah, I'm all in. So I thought that was just awesome.
I love it. Thank you, Ed. Thank you, Travis. All right, Dave, I think you mentioned you were ready to go.
Yeah. I'm not going to turn my video. I'm going to spare you guys. I'm dressed for. I'll be the audio version of this. Yeah, so Ben and I had a great conversation. I asked, you know, again the question of what was a high point, and instead of going business side like I did, he his life, which I thought was kind of a warmer approach to talk to someone he had never really met. Talking to Ben, he's from St. Louis, so I had mentioned that I had done some work over our summer in Piedmont, Missouri, which could not be a more remote town. Somehow Ben knew this location, which is kind of crazy because, again, if you find the most isolated spot in Missouri, that's Piedmont. Anyway, Ben was talking about, you know, he with his relation with his wife, they were talking about some entrepreneurial ideas and kind of really doing some soul searching on what they want their future to become. And they had some deep conversations. And what I thought, you know, as we were going through, I thought it's not normal to have, well, not normal. It's not common to hear people have. Is this something that your relationship was always part of, or did this something you just kind of adopted over time? And he had mentioned, no, this was abnormal. They never were those deep conversation type people. And then something triggered, and you know, and he was able to kind of latch onto it and just kind of keep peeling back the onion until now. Which I thought was an amazing takeaway, because normally you're thinking you're talking surface level or just a little bit deeper. But again, having these feature conversations was amazing. You know, and you know, again, an impressive guy. He's got his master's in ERP. He's got a kid who's in kindergarten now, and still thinking future, which is, you know, putting a lot of eggs in a lot of irons into the fire. So, an impressive guy. That's it for me.
Awesome. I love it, Dave. And so I'm gonna cap it up there, because I think there's a couple of really important lessons that you shared with the group that I think we want to highlight here. Is that through these types of interviews, even virtually, but you know, even more so one-on-one in person, what ends up happening through any question like this is that people start to connect on a personal level. And so think about the dynamic in creating safety in any group, any team, any meeting that you're part of, or personal interaction or family. Think about the dynamic you can create by having that safety just through the power of questions and being curious to the response. You can really connect to people. And I've used this in several different situations. And I want to give you a couple right now before I turn it back to Jason here. One was in a work setting where a leader came to me and wanted to create a new job description for one of his employees. And he said, this person's just not cutting it. They're not doing their job. Here's all the things that they're not doing this. So that right away they went negative, right? And I stopped him about 5 minutes in. Like it was clear to me that he had things he wanted to say. And I said, it really sounds to me like there's some challenges with this employee, and you want to rewrite this job description. So I summarized back to him what he said, but then I flipped it. And I said, can we just for a minute, right, focus in on the things that are working well? There's got to be some things that this person's doing well. And so he started to share the things that were working well in the job. And then I asked him a question about, so if you could add anything to this, what would you like to add to it? And instantly that conversation shifted just by asking two, I think Sarah, right, shared with Darren generative questions, right? Questions that move you in the direction that you want. And so just by asking a couple of quick generative questions, it flipped that whole conversation to something that was positive. And what I'll tell you is going through appreciative interviews, and when you do this in a group or a team setting, you can take, show of hands, how many people work with someone where everybody thinks they're an Eeyore or the negative person of the office. Right, some of you are very lucky. The ones that don't have their screen on, I'm just going to assume you have your hands up. So what happens is when you create an environment like this where people are able to connect knee to knee and have these powerful conversations, what you'll often find, I've seen it time and time and time again, is that the perception that there's this negative person in the group will change. We had someone where they wanted us to create one of our summits. They didn't want the person to be invited. And I said, we're not doing this unless you can have your entire team there. So we had to change the date 3 times. They didn't want this person to show up. I wanted to make sure that they were there. This person, through this kind of exercise where they sat down knee to knee and she shared her high point story about working at that organization, the entire room was in tears after she shared it, right? That's how powerful it was. And people realized that there was this human being that they had misread all this time. And just by connecting people to stories when they'd been at their best in that organization, she came alive and that whole team came alive through the process. So appreciative interviews can do exactly what Dave just mentioned, is they can allow people to connect on a personal level, even in a work setting, and create safety instantly in any environment. All right, I've talked long enough here. I just want to see where we're at. I'm gonna switch it over here because I think Jason's gonna take you through something. So I want to share my screen again.
Yeah, and while you're doing that, Jeff, what I wanted to say is what we would normally do in this situation, this was really we would normally do in a situation like this is we would pair you up, you would interview each other, and then we would also ask you to work together to identify maybe 3 to 5 key ideas, insights, energizing images that came out of that conversation. And then when we brought you back, we'd say, okay, share a story, and then share your those 3 to 5 really important ideas that you gleaned from your stories. And so then if you look at this wall, we would write those ideas on a Post-it note, and we would stick them all up on the wall. And then we would group them together. So what I heard, even in this very small example, I heard things around, inquiry versus advocacy. I heard connection. I heard collaboration. I heard empowerment. So what we might do is we might say, okay, those things are all kind of related to each other. So maybe we would label that, there's a theme emerging here. Maybe we'll call that theme, I don't know, curiosity-based collaboration or something, And so then we would have, okay, wait a minute. So curiosity-based collaboration is a really important thing to creating, to a really important idea or theme around excellent leadership. And then we would then walk through the rest of the process and say, okay, what is it about curious collaboration? What could we do? How could we brainstorm some ideas where we could do more of more curious collaboration? And then we would design prototypes to say, okay, now that we have all these amazing ideas about how we could do more, curiosity-based collaboration, now we have let's identify which ones feel the best to us, and let's design some prototypes and implement them, right? I mean, that's a very short version, but it's really, that's what it does. And the cool thing is what we design, the innovations or the change that we design, prototype, and implement is all based on studying the present. So Yeah, so power appreciative is, again, ways to build stories of excellence. So I wanted to share a story too, something that happened with, I can't hear you, Jeff. Can you just go through this?
You keep muting me as I try to unmute myself.
I'm not muting you. Okay, so the fundamental task of any leader. So my belief, our belief, is that the most important, at the end of the day, we need to produce results, but the foundational aspect that will allow beyond what you can even imagine is creating an environment of safety and human, and then asking generative questions that will allow a group's collective intelligence to emerge. So if you can do that as a leader, it is incredible. And the information that will emerge that you can act on to innovate yourself. We call it innovating at the speed of strength. So, and I want to tell you a story about something that happened. I think is a lot of people don't really think about these two things being connected. So we had some really great results on our team last year. You know, we 4x'd the targets that were set for us, and it was now the moment that happened that about, I think it was in the summertime last year, actually. There's a guy on my team. He has really serious, or has dealt most of his life with some really serious mental health, anxiety. He doesn't like talking in front of a group of people. Like that's actually his worst nightmare. And so I asked the team to do some topic that they felt like was interesting to them. It was totally voluntary, no pressure, you know, just for those people that want to maybe share something, you know, teach us something, we can learn a little, practice speaking in front of a group of people. And this guy volunteered, which shocked me actually. And so he stood up in front of the room and he shared his mental health journey with our team. So you take this guy, he's doing something that scares the hell out of him, and he's talking about something that is so deeply personal, and it was room crying, you know, and at the end of it, I said to him, like, my God, man, like that was so powerful. I am so proud of you. And he looked me in the eye and he said, this is the first time in my life that I have ever felt safe enough to be able to share this story. And so when I tell that story with people, there is a direct relationship between that moment and the results that our team got. 100% can create that environment of safety and connection. And then in that sort of, cocoon of safety, ask generative questions that allow a group's collective intelligence to emerge. You are supercharge, your team, and you will supercharge it by studying the very best of what has been, what is, and building on that to create the future that you want.
Hey Jason, I want to jump in really quickly here. Ed posted a comment, and I don't think it was public, but I'm going to share it anyway. He asked a question. He said, "How quickly can you create safety in a setting like that, or in any setting?" And he said, especially in tough environments. And so, I think that's a really important point because the environment that I started out with and many times is an extremely tough environment. And I'm not going to go into it right now, Ed, but I'm going to talk about it later in terms of how do we actually choreograph conversations so that we can create this safety. Because I think that's the important thing that people need to understand is it's great to ask questions, but how do you actually bring the group together and how do you structure those questions and the sharing so that in a tough environment where someone just wants to get their negative stuff out, that you can still keep that safety so that everybody in the room feels safe.
So let me tell you a very quick story. I was doing training this past weekend, to a group of manufacturing leaders. Okay, so basically people from the director level to supervisor. These people were most absolutely blue collar as you can get, and the idea of thinking about strengths and reflecting on high point moments like this was not even in the slightest bit in their wheelhouse. And so this is a perfect example also of deficit-based thinking versus, so the HR person who is attending the training, she comes up and she goes, "Hey, I'd really like to create an opportunity for us to, identify 5 or 6 things that aren't like problems that we're having that we want to focus on." And I'm like, "How about this? So we had their mission statement up on the wall. And I said, what if we, instead of doing that, we explored opportunities where people saw the mission statement being fully lived, and then identified opportunities where we could even, working really, really well on their team that maybe we could even do more of and make them even better. And so, great. And she talked to her VP of HR. So VP of HR goes, that's a terrible idea. Like, don't do that, please. And so, but she decided to go ahead with it anyway. So these people, they are skeptical. They're like, what is even happening here? And I am telling you, within 3 minutes, boom, they started writing down. I asked them to, I tried to use as plain English as possible. I didn't say journal. I said, just write some shit down. Like, I mean, we're talking like I'd spoken the language that they were able to receive, and they absolutely came to life. We only spent 34 minutes on this. We did high point moments, we did continuity, we did brainstorming, and after the I had very little time because the curriculum was structured. After 34 minutes, we were done. They wanted a break. The HR person in the room actually came up and high-fived me, and wants to do that in all of the training that we do with this company going forward. So it works. This was a tough-ass environment, and it worked almost instantly. So, and I guess that's the thing, right? Are you ready? That's a question you need to ask yourself is, are you ready to lead a team that people are lining up to join? That's how I always think of it. As a leader, if I can create a team where people are literally like clamoring when it comes to recruiting, even better. But it also makes my life, when I want to bring people in to work with us, even better, because people want to work with our team. So the question you need to ask yourself, are you ready to lead a team that people are lining up to join? And if you do that, so you can implement the goals that matter. You can solve the most complex problems by bringing a whole system of people into the room faster and more naturally than ever before. And all the while, people will grow individually, as a team and organization. And the cool part about it is too, as when I think about this method as a gift to humanity, what happens is people learn this stuff and they understand that concept of looking for strengths and appreciation and focusing on the positive, and they take it home. They take it home to their families, and they become more connected. And so it's a beautiful, not only that you can give to your team and to your organization, but again, to the world at large.
All right. So some great stories here. What I want to do with you guys now is actually share, as I mentioned earlier, some of the science behind this, because I think it's important to understand, a lot of people, when they hear of appreciative inquiry, we tell them what we want to do, or the example that Jason gave in the environment last weekend, why don't we do this instead? And the automatic answer is no, we don't want to do that. Or the answer I've heard in an organization before is, oh, we're not going to throw t-shirts and do all this positive mumbo jumbo, are we? And what my response to that is this methodology is actually rooted in science. And the process that you take people through by focusing on some key things, it works time and time and time again. And the people that are in our community that facilitate and that are trained in this, the people that are trained in this will often say, you know what, I planned this, I totally screwed this up, I did this wrong, but it was amazing, right? And it was amazing because this methodology is rooted in science. And there's some key principles that I want to walk you guys through really, really quickly here. And so I've shown this kind of as, a foundational house, or, you think this at the bottom is the foundation, these pillars going up, and all of that is appreciative inquiry. And so if you research appreciative inquiry, you do a Google search on it, you're going to find anywhere you go, it's just the 5 principles of appreciative inquiry. But really, the entire theory is built from the foundation up. And Jason mentioned this earlier, if you guys didn't catch it. It's all built on the constructionist principle. And so these are the principles that David and his team came up with as they evolved this over the years. But the constructionist principle really says that our reality is constructed through social interaction. So our words create our worlds. we will create a new reality through the conversations that we have with individuals and people, right? That's what the constructionist principle says. So that if you think about this masterclass and why we're doing it with some experiential nature to it, because your reality and how this approach works is going to happen by verbalizing it and talking about it and coming to life as you do it, right? Your reality changes as you interact with other people. Okay, so that's the foundation behind this. It's all about how do you bring people together to have conversations that move them forward and focus on words that take them in the direction that we want to go. And anybody that's been through our training programs or one of our masterminds, they know that we focus on this one statement intently, is that your words really do create your worlds, and you want to be very intentional with the words that you use. Okay, so we're gonna create our reality through the conversations that we have, and then we have these pillars that kind of support that. So as you're having these social interactions, you come into the first one, which would be the simultaneity principle. I always have trouble saying these, which is basically what it says is that inquiry is change, right? Inquiry is change. When you ask a question, you drive change. And it also says that the very first question that you ask sets the tone for the entire conversation you're going to have. And I'll share with you guys, as we created this workshop, Jason and I reiterated on our questions over and over and over again. I created the first question, and when I shared it with Jason, he said, "Oh, I don't feel good about this." Right? He said, "I don't feel good about this because I'm worried that some people could come up with negative responses to it." And really the moral behind the story is that you need to be really intentional about these questions that you create, the questions that you ask, using these principles that I'm going to explain, because that very first question will set the tone for the entire conversation. It's fateful. And if you think about this, the analogy that I hear John, our mentor, using all the time is, think of it like a pair of glasses. For anybody that's wearing glasses, you don't have your glasses on. As soon as you put your glasses on, you're now looking at the world through a new lens. And so questions are like a lens. And as soon as you put that new lens on, you're going to see differently. And so you can actually say that the moment that you ask a question, your future changes even before the answer arrives, because you started to focus on something different. So if I build from that, the next principle is the poetic principle. And we just proved it through the exercise that we went through, is that people come alive through their positive stories. Right? If you want to move from deficit-based thinking or deficit-based leadership to strength-based leadership, get people to share positive stories from their past. Get people to share positive stories that they're doing today. I guarantee you they will immediately come to life, right? Not only that, the poetic principle says the stories that we get people to share, the stories we focus on, grow. So if you're in a conversation and you ask people to share a problem story or something where things went wrong or where people haven't been at their best, what always happens? It becomes this complaining session, right? One person after another is just complaining and is very negative. Whatever whatever story you decide to tell, and whatever story you tell first, and what story you ask people to share is what the group is going to focus on. What we're going to focus on individuals and what the group is going to focus on. So recognize that you want to ask people to tap into stories of when they've been at their best. All right. The next one is the anticipatory principle. And these ones I'm going to go through really quickly. When I used to introduce appreciative inquiry, I used to talk about these last two principles and forget the others. Not that I would forget them, but I just didn't think people would buy into them. Now I understand the science behind it, and they're all very important. But the anticipatory principle basically says that the images we create are going to inspire our action. And the positive principle says, if you're going to focus on something, so if people come alive through positive story, or if what we focus on grows, then why not, if you're focusing on something, why not focus on what you want instead of what you don't, right? So if you want to focus on negative things, the negative things might grow. The positive principle says, if you're going to focus on something, focus on strengths, building from strength, the images that you want in the future, positive stories, focus on those things, and it'll nurture and grow whatever it is you're working on. So those are the principles that David Cooperrider created. And with the training that we've been through, the certification, there's actually a few more things that I want to share with you guys. And so I'll just pull them all up at once. As we mentioned at the beginning, we're trained with LEAF, which is leading with experiential and appreciative facilitation. And there's 3 core ideas within this methodology through the Flourishing Leadership Institute that they really, they ground themselves upon. And so the first is strength-based, and that's where the strength-based appreciative leadership comes from. It's strength-based in a couple ways, right? You want to bring individual strengths into the room. You want to bring group strengths, like I mentioned at the beginning of the call. But what we recognize is that every single group, because of the unique experiences people bring, is a unique configuration in and of itself of strengths, capabilities, and potential. And our role as facilitators and leaders is to understand what those strengths are, bring those to the surface, have people share stories about them, and release the potential that's already in the room waiting to emerge, right? That's our role as a leader. There's a quote out there by Peter Drucker, and Jason and I always talk about this one because there's a couple things fundamentally we don't necessarily buy into, but Peter Drucker's quote says something like, the role of a leader is to align a system's strengths so that its weaknesses become irrelevant. And what I always say is that it's so that its system's weaknesses seem irrelevant. They're going to be there. You can't ignore and push down negative, but if you focus on positive, and there's some science behind what that ratio is, it's, you know, some people say 5 to 1, others say 6 to 1. You focus on the positive, that's what's going to emerge from it. The second key thing under a LEAF approach is that it's a whole system approach. And that is, it's not bottom up or top down. Everyone needs to have a voice in that room. And so many of the organizations we work with, PV is a perfect example. You know, we had the steering committee session with PV, and many of the executives were in the room. They said, well, this isn't the executives. We don't want to come in and dictate the conversation. We said, no, this is a whole system. It's not bottom up. You need everybody to have a voice. Everybody needs to be represented. When you bring a group of people together, it should be a microcosm of the entire organization. When you do that, you give everybody in the organization a voice.
Can I give a quick example of that, Dave? Jeff, sorry.
Yeah.
So we're going to do a summit around elevating the practice of software development. So making it a competitive advantage and putting the customer at the center of what we do. So you can't do that and do it to the best of your ability by only having software developers in the room. You need to have customers in the room, like, you know, technology leaders, maybe teams, representation for the different teams that software developers interact with to do their job. So you bring system together to get as many voices, as many stories, and as many perspectives in the whole system. And when you do that, it's much, much more powerful.
All right. Thank you, Jason. Good point, right? It's when we say whole system, it's not necessarily just the people in the room. It could be customers. It could be their stakeholders. It could be everybody. And the last key thing with the LEAF approach is that it's dialogue driven. And so back to Ed's question earlier is, you know, how do you create safety in some of the toughest environments? It's through the choreographing of the conversations, right? And so we have a methodology we're going to share with you in a minute about how we choreograph conversations intentionally so that the conversations end up being life-giving, right? So that we can enable a group to create new possibilities. Think of the British Airways example. We allow the group to create new possibilities for the collective future. So those are the 3 key principles within the LEAF approach that has really allowed us to, you know, even mess up events or summits and have it work flawlessly well because we're still following these principles. So I'm going to turn it over to Jason here, and we're going to really, you know, switch into how do you create an engaged organization or team? Because many of us, that's what we're here to do, right? That's what we came to this masterclass to talk about, is how do you create an engaged team or organization? And at the end of that, I'm going to talk about Ed's question, which is how do you actually choreograph a conversation to create safety? All right, Jason.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks, Jeff. So, talking about employee engagement, I mean, there's data that shows very clearly that engagement is at it's at catastrophically low level. 33% of employees are, what you would consider engaged or highly engaged. 67% are, disengaged or active. And we'll cover this in a minute, but the difference is there's a show that there's massive business benefit, and obviously human benefit, but massive business benefit to creating a more highly engaged workforce. And we really believe that this method that we're teaching you tonight is a really powerful way to do that. So Microsoft's a good example. 2011, who was Steve Ballmer, I think, was the CEO. They had this, Microsoft had this culture where, everybody was siloed. There was, very adversarial between different units, and their share price reflected it. Their positioning in the marketplace reflected it. And so what happened is, can you go to the next one, Jeff? I can't. Satya Nadella. So he joins the company, and he focuses idea of a growth mindset, of building from strength, about making the cultivation the most important thing that his most important focus. And how did he do it? He did it by exactly fostering curiosity, ideas. And since he became CEO and focused on strength, the idea of a growth mindset, the price has gone up significantly since that time. And so this is some of the data. We won't go over all of this, but this is some data from Gallup, who I think every couple of years, they do this report. The numbers are basically the same in Canada. And so what they show is when compared with business units in the bottom quartile of engagement with those in the top, there's huge improvements, like 41% lower absenteeism, lower turnover, less, even safety incidents, like quality incidents, productivity, sales, profitability are higher. We've seen this in our own organizations and the organizations we work with. So dismiss engagement at your peril. I remember when I was younger, just shut the hell up and do your job, please. Like, that's why you're here, and if you should be engaged because you're being paid to be here. Fortunately, I recognize now that, I have a slightly better understanding of human motivations and the human condition, let's say. And so I recognize now that as a leader, my job, one of the most important things that I can do, intentionally foster a culture where engagement, employee engagement is, a primary focus. And it just works amazingly well. So, the next slide, Jeff. And so this is a really important point. So often what we do is actually what I described at the beginning, where it's like, okay, well, how are we going to engage people? And we're going to get them together, and we're going to do a focus group and what's wrong. But actually, the best way to engage, actually, in imagining into best future, realize by, again, asking these questions and bringing people together and creating safety, but then instilling as a leader, and this can, as a leader, this can be a little bit scary, actually, especially for people who are used to like sort of leadership approach. I'm the leader, you do what I say, and maybe their leader above that kind of leader too. The truth, though, is that doesn't really work. It might work for a short period of time, but it is not an effective long-term strategy to produce, the highest levels of productivity, the highest levels of quality, the highest levels of customer service. And so the best way to actually engage people is to engage them in designing their own friggin' future. So bringing them together and exploring the best, and then actually getting them to design the ideas that they think will carry the team, the organization forward into the future, and then implementing them and recognizing that, hey, we're not going to get this right the first time. The LEAF approach that we're talking about, which is appreciative inquiry, but it also incorporates design thinking. And so design thinking is, for those that don't know what it is, it's a very long established methodology, but it's really a way of rapidly designing and iterating on ideas as quickly as possible. So when you recognize as a leader, you say to your team, look, let's we have all this great information. Let's design a prototype. So you might ask a question like, how might we, I'll give you actually a real life example from my team. So we have core values. The question we asked was, how might we design a Monday meeting in which celebrating and building on our core values is a part of the fabric of that meeting? How might we do that? And so then you send them away and you get them to design these visual prototypes. And what they came up with as a team was incredible. We're going to have a core value of the week. We're going to have rotating facilitators. The facilitator is going to ask a generative question related to this core value. We're going to have a star of the week, the person who's most embodied this core value. Amazing. And now what we're going to do next week is like you never get a design right the first time, and every design has an expiry date. So now what we're going to do is we're going to take that meeting and we're going to level it up. And we're not going to level it up by saying, hey, what sucks about this meeting? We're going to do the opposite. We're going to ask two very simple questions. What is working great? And what might make it even better? And so then we're going to do a rapid brainstorming session, and then we are going to design we're going to go through the prototyping phase again, and we're going to design it again. But the point is that they are designing the fabric of our team. And man, I am telling you, there is so much ownership when they do that. So as a leader, it's so easy to create that environment and to give them the permission and then ask the questions that guide them towards creating this, creating tangible things that will create the future, that move us closer to the future that we want to create.
Hey, Jason, I want to jump in real quick here. I think there's two important points that I want to, add to the conversation. Many people will hear about this approach, and one of the ways that we bring this into organizations is through, we help them with strategic planning. Exactly to this point, right, is we bring the whole system together to help them create their strategic plans. And I can tell you as a leader for years, my response to that would have been, you want to charge me how much to bring this many people together and all the logistics with that to create our strategic plan? I don't think so. We're going to create it and then tell them what we need to do. The response would be, how can I afford that? But in reality, what I've come to learn is that how can you afford not to, right? You can spend 2 or 3 days bringing your entire group together, maybe a year planning it, but bringing a whole group together to imagine and create your future and designing the actions and putting them in place. You can do that in 2 to 3 days and actually have people go out and execute on them. Or you can try to do it, with a couple people in a room and then spend a year communicating why you want people to implement the goals that you think are important to them and have them fail. And then go through it again and then wait another year and have them fail and go through it again. So my question is always, how can you afford not to do this? But how can you afford not to bring the people together into the room so that they can bring your strategy to life? And similar to Jason's story, I mean, we brought a group together. We did a values exercise. We brought, the leader in, had him share with that group what his visions were for the next year. That group created 2 goals in a 1-day session. They created 2 goals last July with an end date of June 30th of this year for them to be implemented. They created them, based on what the leader shared. They created their own goals. They decided what they would be. They were big goals. And I can tell you, one is done, and the other one will be finished on April 1st, 3 months ahead of schedule. And, me as a leader of that team, what have I done? I meet with them once every 2 weeks to ask them how it's going. Give me a positive check-in on how the progress you're making with their goals. And they've done everything. I've had no involvement whatsoever with those 2 goals as a leader. They're doing it. They've owned it. They've brought them to life, and they're ahead of schedule. So you can't, in my mind as a leader, you can't afford not to do this. All right, back to you, Jason.
All right, next slide. Yeah, so I want to talk about psychological safety, right? So I told a story a little bit earlier where the guy on my team, shared a really powerful and personal story about his mental health journey, and again, tying that, the connecting that moment to the results that our team got, I think is really important. And so the reason that happened, Jeff alluded to the fact earlier that this method can create instant psychological safety in any group. And psychological safety is to me, and to based on research that Google's done, is the most important thing that as a leader that you should be working on creating in your team. Okay. So some of you may know this. Google did the exhaustive study. It was over a number of years. And the purpose of the study was to try to figure out, like, what makes high performing teams? What are the characteristics that are in place when we see high performing teams? And they came up with 5, which you can see on the screen. But the number one thing by far was psychological safety. Team members feel safe to take risks and be vulnerable in front of each other. Okay. And Patrick Leoncini, the guy that wrote the 5 Dysfunctions of a Team, he's also written a book called The Advantage. And one of the things he talks about is that, again, basically the same thing. He calls it vulnerability-based trust. But he says that is the absolute most important thing. So if you can create, and when we say be vulnerable, it's anything from, I want to ask for help. I want, I'm dying here. I need some help. I need some insight. I have an idea, or I want, there's something in my in my life that I'd really love to be able to talk about. So to create an environment where people feel safe to do that is one of the most powerful things you can do as a leader. And again, I keep coming back to this. It is a gift that you as a leader can give not only to your team, but to the world. Because I'm telling you what happens. I just had a conversation like this with somebody on my team who, recognizing how powerful this is because of what he's seeing on our team, has now taken that into his relationship with his partner and with his friends. And he said, after all these years, it is changing that relationship. So again, always recognize that what we are talking about right here, is a gift to the entire world. And when you remember that, for me anyways, I always try to remember that, because it just increases my sense of purposefulness, I guess, about why I want to do this work. So how do you actually create psychological safety? Number one is, Jeff was talking about, be a collaborator instead of an adversary, or even instead of like a top-down boss. So I'll give you a really quick example when you talk about collaborator instead of adversity. I had this situation on my team, and this also shows how this kind of method, it can be as broad as like an entire community of people, but it goes down to the micro level, to a specific like one-on-one interactions between 2 people. So I had a guy come to me on my team. He's like, you know what? I need to get this thing done. This guy on my team's not, this guy on another team is not doing it. And I don't know what to do about it. I keep emailing him, but blah, blah, blah. Pretty common thing. So what I would have done in my younger years would have been like, ooh, there's an opportunity for me to be an alpha male here. Hell yeah, I'm going to get this guy. I'm going to go over there and I'm going to get this guy to do the thing he's supposed to do. And I would have taken it as like a personal challenge in order to do that. And so I'm sure, let's say I was able to get him to do it. I would have walked away. Short term, it probably would have felt like it worked to me. Hey, I got the thing done. Cool. This guy now thinks I'm an asshole. I lost the opportunity to know anything about this guy as a human being. And so was it really a win? It might have been a short-term win, but a long-term toxic, an interaction that had toxic long-term. Now, this is that I'm an asshole. So what I did instead was I recognized, okay, first of all, I don't even know this guy. I know nothing about him. I don't know what's going on in his life. I don't know what his day-to-day stuff is like. I don't know how much crap he's getting dumped on him. So I am going to approach this from the perspective of just being curious. I just want to figure out how we might be able to get this thing done together. So I emailed him, which I actually normally don't do. I just had no idea where this guy actually said. I normally just go talk to people in person. But I said, hey, I need some advice from you. We need to get this thing done. And we need to get some of this stuff done. And you're a really important part in us getting that done. How do you think we might work best together in order to make that happen? And it was like, I actually didn't know the answer. I would love to explore how we could work together. 5 minutes later, it was done. Then I was able to go to his boss and say, hey, you know what? I reached out to this. So I thanked him. And then I went to his boss and I said, hey, I went to him, with this issue, and he got it done for me right away. And I really appreciate it. So now I've got a relationship with him. I've got a relationship with his boss, and the thing that needed to get done got done. So forget being an adversary and approach it as a curious, like we said in that theme, curiosity-based collaborator. The other one is speak human to human. Like, again, the conversations that we have, as Jeff said, words create worlds, and just talk to people like they're human beings. Understand that we're all having our own experience. We all deal with every single human emotion, and being the type of person that can take it, down from the business level, down from always talking about KPIs or whatever, is talking about stuff that really matters to people on a human to human level. And it's amazing, not only what you'll learn about people, but when you create a sense of safety, it's like this, beautiful bubble in which you can connect, and where great ideas can be, explored. And you come out of it and you're like, man, I didn't know that about you. I didn't know you knew that, man. And, and it's amazing what happens. And the last one is replace blame with curiosity. Okay. We have this way of, we all do this. We make up stories about the things that happen to us. That's how our brains make sense of what's going on in the world. We make up stories about what's going on. So if something doesn't go the way you want, instead of just automatically defaulting to blame, instead lead with curiosity. Always, always, always lead with curiosity, because you don't know what happened. You don't know what you might be able to learn as a result of a failure that might have happened. But if you go in with blame, you're never going to learn what you could, the key lessons, because failure or mistakes, they are part of all of our human journey. There's nothing, it's always going to happen to us. So how we deal with them as leaders is incredibly powerful. So imagine if actually, I'll give you an example. Somebody was on my team had shown up late for a couple of meetings. Okay. So I just went up to her and I said, normally I would have taken this as some kind of challenge. And I said, hey, I've noticed you've been late for a couple of our meetings. And I'm just wondering if there's anything I can do, like if you could help me understand why, and if there's anything that maybe we could do to help you. I don't know, do we need to move the time of the meeting or whatever? I'm open to talking about anything, but I really would just love to understand how I might be able to help. And it was amazing. And she was like, oh, her dog had died the day before on this particular, and I was up all night and I haven't slept. And it was an amazingly connecting moment. And she's never been late again. Right. So you don't have to attack, just be curious, because you really people, but when people see that you actually care enough to understand what's going on, it creates so much psychological safety. I think this is you, Jeff.
This is me. I was trying to unmute myself. Okay, so this goes back to the earlier question by Ed, right? How do you create safety in a room, especially the tough rooms, any room, I would say. How do you create safety? It's through choreographing conversations. And I'm going to give you an example here to that point, but there's a methodology we follow without fail every single time. And it's this methodology of asking the question, giving people time to think, then pairing them up to share with someone else, and then having them share with a bigger group. And you could add to this. You could do think, pair, share, or you could do, think, share, or you could do think, pair. But there's always, the time, and it's think, pair, share. It could be journal, pair, share. It could be write your thoughts down, like Jason said. But you want to give them that time to reflect, to write some thoughts down, some points down. You want to pair them up, and you want to have them share with the bigger group. And in some cases, you want them to share with a smaller group and then a bigger group. And the reason we do that, this is the fundamental thing behind creating safety in a group, is it allows the group to self-select the stories that are going to energize. And so I'll give you an example. We will actually get really intentional about how we choreograph conversations in a summit where we bring, let's say, 50 people together, where we will talk with the leaders to say, who are the people that you think are going to want to focus on the negative? Who do you think is going to want to share negative stories or complain about different things? And we'll pair them up strategically at tables, or we'll bring them into group settings. When we go from a journal to a group to share in a group format, We'll use colored dots on chairs. We'll use colored dots on name tags so that we can control who's coming together in a group, so that we can have someone in that group that understands how to ask generative questions. But we'll bring them together in a group. That group will share their stories, right? So if you think back to the high point story we talked about earlier in the appreciative interviews, everybody will share those stories. Then we ask them to vote up the most energizing story. And what I would say to you is, even in the toughest situations, when you've asked a positive story, a high point moment, when someone's been at their best, even if there's a negative story in that circle, the group will only self-select the positive stories to move forward. And so if you ask a question that's positive, generative in nature, moves people forward, even if there's negative people in the room, the group's going to self-select those messages right out so that it doesn't, I don't love this word, but it doesn't contaminate the bigger group, right? You're wanting the positive stories to come through. The other example I gave you earlier is another really good way in a tough environment to move people from negative to positive. And anybody that's been part of our mastermind groups has seen this over and over again. As soon as we end up going down a rabbit hole and it becomes negative, we'll flip the conversation really quickly. We'll ask a generative question. Someone will say, well, I don't want this and I don't want this and I'm really frustrated with this. And we'll say, we hear that you're frustrated with this. What is it you'd like to see instead? Right? Just by flipping it with a single question like that. So as soon as someone stands up in a room, which, by the way, if I'm facilitating a group, unless I know the people in that room and I know the safety of the room, I very rarely will let someone just share without choreographing the conversation, because it can end in disaster, because you can't control what they're sharing. But if they do, right, if that happens, what you do in that moment is ask a generative question, a flipping question that moves them in the direction they want instead of the direction they don't. So this is the methodology we follow every time, and we're letting you guys into the insights, right? When we're asking you guys to share, and I'll take you back to the appreciative interviews, and Dave shared some really interesting insights as it relates to the process that you guys just went through. That's an ending high point moment. It's a high point story that's emerged from the group. I will end the group shares on that note, because now I'm controlling how we leave the exercise. I'm controlling that we leave it on a high point, right? So we keep the energy moving towards what we want. And like I said before, use generative questions to shift those conversations from negative to positive. So if you want, even in the toughest settings, to create conversations that move us forward, conversations that matter, conversations that are energizing, use this type of approach after you've asked a powerful question. All right, so we've just dumped a whole bunch of information on you guys, and we have some case studies here that Jason, maybe we just run through these really quickly on, where we, what we were doing with these case studies instead of going through all the details, and then we'll open up to maybe the final exercise and some questions.
Yep, sounds good. Okay, so this is actually something on Tuesday. So we spent the entire day. So this, we wanted to create a technology leaders community of practice. And what we did was we spent the entire day, we all flew into Winnipeg, and we used Leaf to actually design the community of practice. What I will tell you is people at the end of it were like mind boggled at what we were able to accomplish immediately, by asking really powerful questions related to, them as human beings. And then we moved through it. And by the end of this day, we had designed prototypes and created deployment plans. And they were just absolutely blown away. I asked for feedback, and there was feedback on the session, and there was a list a mile long of every single thing they loved. And the only thing, when I asked them, what would you love more? Somebody said booze. We had some beer. That was about it. So incredibly powerful, but we accomplished an amazing amount in a very short period of time. You're okay.
Yeah. See how I was going to flip that? I moved the slide on you, Jason.
Yeah.
Here's another example. So this was a couple of years ago now, similar to a story Jason shared earlier at Western University, where they had an employee, they called it an employee engagement survey. So they brought an outside group in, consultant in. The entire university went through this employee opinion survey. They got the results, and they wanted to do what every single organization I've ever known wanted to do with those results, is they wanted to get focus groups together on all the questions that we scored low on so that we could improve them. And so what I did is I convinced the leadership group to say, what if instead of doing that, what if instead of bringing the group together to focus on the questions we did low on, what if we flipped the conversation and had the group come together to first celebrate all the things we did, all the questions we scored well on, and ask them questions around how could we build upon the areas that we're excelling at to elevate and improve on the other areas in the survey. And we didn't specifically say the negative areas. So the leaders still wanted us to talk to the questions that scored low, but we did it in a way that built from a place of strength and brought people alive through the conversation. So we didn't bring them together to solve problems. We brought them together to elevate the university as a whole. And so what I can tell you is at the end of that full day summit, back in 2017, there was 3 initiatives created, and those initiatives are still in place today and they're flourishing. It's unbelievable, right? The shift in momentum that happened as it relates to engagement. And I go back to the bottom of this slide, it says engagement at work. This was the first question I put up to start the day. What is engagement and why is it important to you? They had done an engagement survey. That's the question. I asked them a purpose-driven question, and then I asked them to share a high point moment. All right, so exceptional results, a totally different way of looking at employee opinion surveys than the traditional problem-solving deficit-based approach.
Okay, next one is PV. So this was interesting. Jeff mentioned, so there's a company called PV, and then there's another really well-recognized brand in Canada called TSC. And so PV acquired TSC. And so what they want to do is they want to plan a summit next year, or now it's this year, around how do we join these 2 companies into a cohesive family. So we worked with them to say, okay, we brought a steering team together. And as Jeff said, we had representation from the whole system. And we really studied moments of excellence, dreamt of the evocative future. What do we want this summit to be? What would this this company look like when it was fully merged and working in an amazing way? What kind of summit could we create that would really set the tone for this journey that we are embarking on? And we did a lot of very, something called one conversation brainstorming, which is a really rapid way of brainstorming. We visually prototyped ideas for the important event, and then we developed commitments and deployment plans. And we did this all in one day. And I'm telling you, they walked out of there like on cloud 9 about what they were able to accomplish. And one last thing. So we have this thing at London Life called the value statement. And so really what we did was we said, okay, we were going to go through this goal setting process. And instead I said, okay, you know what, instead of just going through the goal setting process, why don't we, bring the promise statement to life by doing an appreciative design session, a LEAF session on how do we set and achieve our goals in a way that brings the promise statement to life? And it was amazing. 2.5 hours. We did appreciative interviews. We did design session. We came up with initiatives, and we now have 4 work streams that are going through. That's an example of a visual prototype about the whole goal setting process. And after 2.5 hours, we had 4 initiatives that came out of it that are being executed on very, very quickly in order to make this happen. And we're fundamentally changing how we, as a leadership team, how we set and achieve goals in the organization.
Yeah, and I'll just share this one with you because, I guess this isn't a case study. This is a way you can go and apply this tomorrow, right? Many of us are in meetings. We come together, we're in groups. Some of us are leading groups. You can apply these questions to your next team meeting, right? So as you go into that team meeting, instead of telling people, hey, we're here to talk about this and here's all the important information you need to know, just fill in the blank, right? Why is this, whatever you're meeting about, the topic, important, right? Why is it important to you? Why is it important to this group? Why is it important to our organization? And then when you ask them that question, take them through, give them time to reflect, connect, and share. And I can use different think, pair, share, reflect, connect, share. You can use whatever acronyms you want that makes sense for your organization. It could be write, pair, share, write, interview, share. You get the point, right? But ask them a purpose-driven question instead of telling them what the meeting is going to be about. pair them up with each other and have them share what they came up with. And I guarantee you what they share around why that topic's important is going to be way better than anything you could have said. You could ask them a high point moment. Tell us about a high point moment. An example of when you've seen us do, and again, back to the blank, this thing that we've come together to convene about really well. What did you contribute? What did others contribute? Or ask them a future-driven, image question. Say, hey, I see we're talking about this generative future image question. If I could give each of you 3 wishes that would come true 1 year from today, what would you wish for? What would those 3 things be? And tell me why. Right? Give them time to reflect, connect, and share. So those are ways you can bring this to any group session that you're a part of, whether you're a leader or whether you're just a participant in the room. You can put up your hand and say, hey, I can see that we're not getting somewhere with this topic the way we're approaching it. What if we just tried a different approach? Are you guys open to doing a little exercise? Ask them one of these questions and apply it. Okay, let's keep moving here. Jason, do you think we should still do this exercise based on time?
No, I think we should probably skip it, actually.
Okay, I'm going to talk to it though. This is an example of a future image question, right? And there's many of them. But what we were going to have you guys do is just to reflect on the insights and experiences that you've heard today, right? We've shared a whole bunch of information, and you've gone through some experiential exercises. And anybody who leads a conference, or if you're going to speak in a team meeting, it's a good way to bring it to life after you share the insights. But we were going to say, what conversation approaches, appreciative questions could you bring into your work or home to make an immediate yet lasting impact? And then a probing question underneath that, what would you be seeing, hearing, and feeling that represents the highest potential for you, your team, or your organization? And then we're going to ask you to share your answers and share the images that give you the most energy. So you notice when I ask people to share, I'm very intentional about what I'm asking them to share. I'm always asking them to share what makes you, what energizes you. What's a story that you really loved, right? So you're leading them down a path to share something really inspiring or energizing. All right, that's it. So before we open it up to questions here, which I think is really important, I'm going to go to the next slide, which is a give and an ask of you guys is that we want to give you a couple tools because we've given you a whole bunch of information, but we want to give you a checklist, so to speak, of the art of question design, which is really the 3 fundamental elements that make up a great question. And we want to give you, some example generative questions that you can use in any setting, in any environment for your team. And so I've got a link up there. We'll share it with you guys after as well. We'll put it in the chat box here maybe before the end of the call. What we want you to do is just do a quick survey. It's literally like 10 questions. Just tell us what you thought about the masterclass and how you might be using this in ways that we could elevate this in the future. And when you do that, you'll put in your email and we'll send you those 2 tools, which are extremely beneficial. I'll tell you, I give a ton of credit to Jason because he's created these, and he'll attest to every once in a while, I'm like, hey, send me those generative questions again. So I'm looking forward to having this as a tool, as a checklist type thing as well. So our ask is that you do that for us so that we can make this better for next time. Again, it's all about elevating and building from strength. So please fill out that survey. We'll get you guys those 2 amazing tools. And that's it. Questions? I'm going to stop the share here. And then I'm going to share it just before we leave the call, because there's an amazing offer that is not from us that I want to share with you guys. And it's really to benefit Mark and Brooke. Any questions, guys?
God, we were so good. There's no questions.
Yeah, I'll jump in with one, guys. So, this approach can be pretty provocative and pretty different for a lot of large organizations. Have you experienced a situation where you've gone in and you don't have full alignment from upper management? And if you have had that experience, how did you overcome it? And did it affect the level of engagement that you did have with the group that were in the room? So in often in many cases you won't have the CEOs and upper management in the room, right? Can you share any experiences that you might have run into in those regards?
Yeah, I can share a couple, Scott, with you. You know, the first one I'll share with you is just one of the case studies that we put up a minute ago was a PV example. We actually did the one-day steering committee session and then went to their, I don't know if you call it a barbecue or whatever it was, Jason, after. And one of the executives that wasn't in the room, if you guys remember, I said they didn't have the whole system represented in that steering team meeting, which is a risk because it was more of it's a bottom-up approach. We met with one of the executives at that barbecue, and he was drilling us. What did you get out of it? Am I going to get a report? What's the output from this? You know, he was going through all the typical analytical questions, and we quickly, you know, pulled the CEO aside and the director of HR and said, you know, we need to get that individual to another session so he can see appreciative inquiry for real life, or we need to bring the steering team together, like the executive team, and do a 2-hour meeting with them or something like that. So that's one way to counter that is to, you know, actually bring the executive team together first and let them experience it and ask them how they feel about it. And usually when people go through this and they feel, you know, they feel energized through it, they're like, oh, I can now see how this is going to benefit the team. But the other part is to make sure that you bring them into the room. So have I ever had a situation where executives didn't buy in and we were still going ahead with the summit? Yes. The first one I shared with you guys around the employee opinion survey at Western, there was a couple senior leaders that didn't buy into it. One of them was actually the t-shirt example, right? Don't tell me we're going to bring this group together and you're going to throw t-shirts at everybody. I don't buy into that positive shit, is what he said. And so, you know, I just listened and I said, okay. So I went back and I thought, before we bring this group together, I need to find a way to bring all these people in the room and share with them what we're going to do. And so, you know, there's 2 ways to counteract it. One, you can do it live in the moment, and there's a big risk with that, but I'll tell you what the approach is there. The other is you try to get them in ahead of time and get their input. And you try to use some of their input. If there's one good idea, this is the whole principle behind appreciative inquiry, build from strengths. Get their one good idea and make sure you build it into the summit. And then as you design those group tables, pair them up with someone who can ask them a generative question during the workshop. So we spent a lot of time in that session, you know, understanding, okay, when we break out into these groups, who do we want to be in a group together? And then I met with 5 people, because there's going to be 5 different groups. I met with 5 people, and I taught them about appreciative inquiry, and I taught them how to ask generative questions. And their job was a co-facilitator to help those conversations move in the direction we wanted during the session itself, and it went really well. There was one person who got up at the very end of the day that still wanted to get their negative comments out and did. And I can tell you it was uncomfortable and awkward, but I didn't have to say a word because everybody else came in and started asking them generative questions, and it was beautiful, right? So it can, you know, it can naturally happen through the session itself. I'll share with you guys with PV, you know, we don't need that executive come because he's no longer with the organization. So he won't be at the one in the fall anyway. Great question, Scott.
Yeah, perfect question.
Anyone else?
Leaders.
Everybody wants to go to bed? All right, well, I'm going to share my screen again. We're available to you guys if you have questions that you think of things after and how you might be able to apply it, or you need help and want to understand some different exercises you can bring into your organization, by all means, reach out. Darren.
I've got a question. Yeah, I just, in my mind, to use this in an organization, it's a 1 or 2 day workshop. So I'm curious, Jason, how you managed to do that in a 2-hour workshop.
Oh,
it seems like a lengthy process, you know, to do that. So I'm curious about that.
Yeah. So as I was telling you, what I did last weekend took 34 minutes. That you can do it all. So with appreciative inquiry, with this method, the most important thing that you need to focus on is what is the task? We got to be laser clear on what are we actually trying to achieve here. And once you understand that and you have total clarity on what the appreciative task, we call it, what it is we're trying to do, then you can design a session around that. So if you look at the example from last weekend, all that was really all that they really wanted out of it, and all we really had time to do, was to get the ideas that were most important to people, like the ideas around living the company's mission statement, like how do we bring this mission statement to life? They just wanted to get some ideas on what people thought were important. So when it comes to that, you don't have to go through this whole process, like this whole, appreciative interviews and like all this. You can condense it down to, well, you still go through the process, but you actually condense it down. So what I do work with my teams, like for example, our core value session was 90 minutes. Our design session was 90 minutes. So in that case, we broke them up into two. This session that I did last on Tuesday, that was a full day, right? So it's totally context specific. So if you were going to do if you wanted to say, bring us in to do a strategic planning session or summit, that's a multi-day thing. Absolutely. But if you want, if we were going to help a team sort of, define and embed core values, that might be, depending, half a day. It could be a full day. I mean, so there's a huge spectrum. And like I said, it can be down to an individual conversation or up at the level of a strategic planning for a whole system. So there's lots of options.
Yeah, let me add to that, right? Darren, I mean, our mastermind call this week, perfect example, right? We were about to have a conversation that would normally, it was just going to be an open dialogue that could have gone negative very quickly, right? And so I'll share with the bigger group, I don't think anybody would mind. It was about relationships, right? And so the conversation, there's a few of us in the group struggling with some relationships, and we wanted more. We're going to talk about relationships and some of those struggles. So instead, I mean, immediately in that moment, as we were going into that conversation, what I said to myself is, I don't want this to go down a rabbit hole negative. And so on the spot, in that moment, what did I do? I asked a purpose-driven question, right? What is it about your relationship, connecting emotionally, physically, spiritually with your partner, that's most important to you? All the elements of that purpose question were right there that I started off that exercise with. The second question, right? What are the high point moments from when you got together as we went through the exercise with one individual? Then I asked a question around, what is it you'd like to see in the future? What is it you need? What is it you want? Right? Purpose, strengths, vision. I did that in a 30-minute exercise on a call. You can do that at any team meeting. And if you're a leader, as you think about the conversation that's about to happen, and you think, man, this conversation can go negative really quickly. So how could I ask questions that move this, conversation from deficit-based to possibility-based by just following these principles? Ask a purpose-driven question. Ask a strengths or high point moment. Ask a values-driven question. How can I live these values and move them forward? How do you, I do it all the time, Mark. A values-driven question. How can you live these values? How can you bring them into the future? How can you, what is it you want in the future? You can do that in any environment at any time. The other example I gave you was the job description, right? Underperforming employee. Think about how all those conversations go when you're talking about an underperforming employee. We flipped that on its head, and in an hour accomplished something that was remarkable with a person that I will tell you is known as a complainer, right? So you can apply this at the micro level like that in a group setting on the spur of the moment. If you understand the foundational questions, you can do it in a 1 hour meeting, a 2 hour meeting, a 4 hour meeting, an 8 hour meeting, a 2 or 3 day event. And usually what I would say is the more people you invite in, the longer the time you need.
So Jeff, let me ask a follow-up question, because I'm actually currently working on like a quarterly assessment that for myself, personal, that touches on identifying values and looking at, using very similar questions, but I'm not really partnering up or anything like that, right? It's really just for me to do a quarterly assessment. Is there anything you would do differently in that setting, or do you recommend really just kind of finding somebody to bounce that off of to create that partnering environment?
Yeah, I love this question. So I love that you're doing this and you're thinking about applying it to yourself individually as it relates to something that's important to you, that you want to build upon, and that you're moving towards a future image. You can absolutely do it, and I love that you're going to do that, Ben. There's a really important part of facilitating conversation, the science behind this, about finding someone to share with, right? And so if anybody's ever heard of the Edgar Dale Cone of Learning, I don't have it readily available to me, but basically what it talks about is, how you bring something to life, how you learn something. And so, what percentage you retain based on each method. And so if you just read something, you retain 10%. If you read and write something, and I don't know these percentages exactly, you just do a search on Edgar Dale Cone of Learning, 20%. If you read, write, and verbalize, it's another percent. And as you start to verbalize with more and more people and share that story and speak about it and then teach others, your retention and your level of, or your ability to execute on it and really bring it to life keeps going up and up and up. So yes, I would strongly encourage you to find someone to share this with. I mean, you're in the Alliance, so you've got people that you can connect with that are on this call, right? To say, hey, can I just share this with you? They could interview you. I mean, extremely powerful. I love that question. Anybody else? All right, I'm going to do this then. I'm going to share my screen because we've mentioned a couple times that we are certified in appreciative inquiry through the Flourishing Leadership Institute, which is leading with experiential and appreciative facilitation. They sent Jason and I an email this morning because they saw the post that we were doing, and they wanted to help. And so what they said is, hey, John is the person that teaches us this. John Berghoff, he's a genius. He is, unbelievable in how he facilitates and what goes through his mind and the level of detail. I'm grateful to be part of that community. I went to the certification when it first started, and I still go every time because it's that good. He's holding a Future of Leadership Masterclass on March 29th at 2:30 p.m. Eastern. And what he has said is that anybody that was on this call or listens to this replay that wants to join that masterclass, and I don't even know the price because he just sent this to me this morning, but if you register that, it'll probably be a 3-hour workshop. I think his last one was like 6 hours. That's how much detail he went into. So bring your questions to it. But for everybody who registers for that, they're going to donate $150 towards this cause, right? Towards our brother Mark and Brooke and allowing her legacy to lead on. And so if you follow that link, they'll put aside $150 that we can add to this donation total. That was so amazing. So that's amazing. Not only that, if you sign up for their LEAF certification, which is what Jason and I are trained in, they're going to donate 20% of your tuition to anyone, for anyone that signs up, not to anyone. They're going to donate 20% of your tuition to the same cause. So that's unbelievable. I will tell you, they said, are you guys okay sharing this? And I said, absolutely. This training, like I said at the start of the call, has changed my life in so many ways. It's my life's purpose, and I'm grateful for the Flourishing Leadership Institute, John Berghoff, and that entire team in this approach. So take advantage of that, guys. Jason, can we send that link out to everybody after this call?
Yeah, and I don't think there's a cost for the masterclass, actually.
Oh, I don't know. I went there and I didn't even see anything. So I said, I don't know if there's a cost, but they're going to donate $150 for everybody who registers. So check it out. And then if you do happen to go through the certification that Jason and I have been through, I know Scott Brown's going through it with us in April again. Perry Toll's gone through it. There's a few guys that have gone through this certification. It is life-changing, and they're going to, generous offer 20% of their tuition.
Yeah. So it's an offer. I know Jeff said this, but I'm telling you, John is like one of the best in the world. And in this topic that we are talking about tonight, he is the best in the world when it comes to facilitating this stuff. And he is an absolute genius. So to be able to attend a session for him for free, you'll learn from the very, very best. And they'll also make a donation in Brooke's memory. So
that's amazing.
That's an amazing thing.
Yeah, and to Jason's point, I shared with you who created this, which is David Cooperrider. David Cooperrider no longer facilitates events anymore. He might do one if it's huge, like the United Nations or something. He passes all of his facilitation work to John Murdoch, and that's who runs this training. So he is world class. All right, guys, we will be sending the link out for the survey. We'll send you guys the link for this, and we will. Actually, Jason, if you send the link out for the survey, it'll capture everybody's email, right?
Well, yeah, I don't have it actually. Why don't you post the link in the survey in the chat box right now?
Okay, give me a sec. We're not. Give me a second here, guys.
Mm-hmm.
I have it up somewhere.
Thank you for attending, guys. Thank you for contributing, and I hope we did Brooke proud, Mark.
There's the link to the survey, guys. So if you fill that out and ask for your email right away, we'll get you those 2 cheat sheets, checklists, whatever you want to call them, those amazing questions. We'll send you in an email the link to the Flourishing Leadership Masterclass, and you can take it from there.
Thank you.
Yeah, guys. I really appreciate everything you guys have done. I mean, to even include your mentors is beyond expectation. I'm certainly going to look into this masterclass because I can see this flourishing even well beyond what I originally had anticipated. So.
Awesome.
Thank you, Mark.
Glad to help, brother.
All right, gentlemen and ladies, have a wonderful evening. Thanks again for joining, and we'll talk to you guys soon.
Take care, everyone.
Thanks, guys. This was awesome.
Yours in strength.